afternoon, Mr. Flores. We want to thank you, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Rydell, and I would like to thank you for agreeing to do this interview. As you know, our LA students are working on their first IB unit. Part of that unit has each student interviewing a significant person in their lives and creating a timeline of that person's life. There's an important question they must remember to ask their person, and I will be asking you that question too. But first, some background information to start. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. When in the 1980s.
Good, that you can be that specific. So when is it you came to the United States?
When I was in second grade.
And what kind of move was that? Was that a difficult move for you?
No, actually it wasn't. It was, it's been so long it's hard to remember, but I don't remember it being very difficult.
Right,
yeah.
so. When you think back to your childhood in Mexico or after your move, who was important to you? Who are the people that you can remember as being important?
So my second grade teacher, Miss Bauman, she was one of them. Maybe because she was kind of new to me. My mother always kind of was a big someone who is and was important. Continues to be important.
Where did you go to college, and why did you choose that school?
I went to Sonoma State University for my undergrad. I went there because it was affordable, and it was a good school, and it was small enough and isolated, rural enough that I knew I could focus on school.
Those are some good ideas to have in mind when you choose a school. During your growing up years, in your college years, did you have a variety of jobs? What kind of jobs have you had in the past?
I worked at when I was in high school, I worked at a video store, movie store, and a small mom and pop shop, and then it went out of business. And then I worked for another one, and then it went out of business. And then I worked at Disneyland, in food service, at California Adventure when it first opened around that time. I did that for a few years, and then I worked at a golf course, waiting tables and setting up for weddings and busing tables and all of that stuff. And then I worked at a Sizzler as a waiter for most of my time in college.
So you've had a variety of different jobs. What, if anything, did these various jobs teach you? What did you learn about yourself, or what did you learn about what you wanted to do? How were they helpful?
So I think all of the jobs taught me a little bit about hard work, being persistent, and that means doing things you don't want to do, so that you can get beyond that and not have to wait tables or stock videos or whatever for a long time. So that was one. I think especially waiting tables and service to others is a strong one for me in terms of learning humility. Exactly. And humility goes a long way. And there's a lot of satisfaction in serving others. So those were some of the.
I too grew up in the waitressing department, so I understand what you're saying, and it does help you a whole lot. And I believe everybody should be a waiter or waitress once in their life. It makes them a much better customer. Well, thank you. Thinking of the skills, the capabilities that you have or you've had to get, what are they that have helped you in your life? You may have mentioned some of them when you talked about your work. What else has helped you?
Skills and abilities. I think at least the waiting tables, one of the skills is really listening. Listening, it's kind of important. The other part of the listening part is making sure that you communicate that they've been listened to. That's a good piece. Abilities, ability to read well, I think is good. Served me well. Yeah.
Okay, and you certainly would you say that you had to have a good sense of math? I mean, basic math to know whether or not you were getting the right money to people or various things?
Yeah, so math, the math skills, certainly the computational and procedural stuff, adding, subtracting, dividing, those are all important, but more so, the
people skills?
No, it's, in terms of the math, just the reasoning and analytical piece of that math can teach you helps me think about even now kind of some of the decisions I make. And
So you can see it going
After.
and helping
Mhm.
afterwards, so that's good. When did you decide that you wanted to be a principal?
That was actually maybe recently, actually about maybe a year ago. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and then as a teacher, I thought, why would you ever want to be a principal? And then I started becoming more involved in leadership, and then I said, I could do this. I could be a good assistant principal. I could work well with kids, and that I found a lot of value in that. But then I knew that I wanted to find my sense of style, so to speak, a different way of leading.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I worked for a good principal, just that I could do it in my own way, kind of, and still be successful.
So you realized you were already doing some of that critiquing of how people did something, thinking your own method would be a little bit different.
Would be different, yeah. Would be different. And then I remember listening as an AP and as a teacher. I remember always listening to the principal when they do open house or back to school night and they introduce themselves, and thinking, I could certainly do that. And what would I say if I had to address parents? What would I say if I had to lead a teacher meeting?
Well, very good. It sounds as if you've reflected. You've done some self-reflecting as you went along. It must have been scary when you decided to take that next step to become a principal, or was it?
It wasn't scary. For me, it was about finding the right school to lead. Not just any school, finding a school where there was a lot of potential.
All right. Well, we're very fortunate that somehow your needs or your interests and our school came together. Are there any historical events that happened during your life that made a big impact upon you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I've been doing some thinking, some reflecting about September 11th. I was in college. It was my first year in college, and it was a big event. But for me, I didn't understand the scope, and I don't think any of us really did at that point. But what I remember specifically from all of that was calling my mom, and my mom saying to me in Spanish, "Vente, mijo, you're coming home." And I remember saying to her, "No, I can't. I got to cross 2 bridges, or 1 bridge at least." And she said, "Okay, just stay for a little bit." But I remember a few days later talking to my older brother and him saying, it's really interesting that this has been a really hurtful experience for Mom. My mom was born in Mexico. She spent most of her life there, 35, 36 when she came to the U.S. So it was she was so hurt because it was an attack on our country, on the U.S. And for me to see that from an immigrant myself, and then my mom, to see her taking that so personally. And I remember she did a lot of knitting and sewing of flags and American,
Finding ways to
express her patriotism, which was surprising for me in a weird sense, because we grew up, in soccer we always root for Mexico
Of course,
against the
yes.
U.S. We always, at some sense, we celebrated Mexico, but when it came down to it, we were more American and patriotic than we were Mexican. So that's kind of an interesting, that it took that long. I was 19 or 18 at the time to see the sense of patriotism that my mom had.
It had been
Because we
there,
don't talk, it had been there,
right.
but we just don't talk about that.
Well, you mentioned how significant she was to you, and that certainly shows a part of that and how that is. Now, I had said that there was this question that we were getting to, and the question that we need to know is, I want you to think of a significant person in your life. It might be your mother, it might not. And if you thought back on her life, is there something that you could have changed in your life? Let's try that again, excuse me. Thinking about a setting in your life, is there anything in your own personal life that you would have changed had you some event that might have led to a different setting? Is there anything you would have changed now that you've lived these many years? Is there anything you would have changed
In
about your
general or
life?
specific to
In
studies?
general.
Okay. I think one of my professional regrets is not ever coaching sports, not ever coaching some sort of event. That's
The
kind of-
real life of a principal, it never ends.
So that would be, yeah, coaching. I would have, not so much for the, certainly for the experience and to say I've been a coach, but the more I learn about great teachers, good, effective teachers, it's a lot like coaching.
Mhm.
And that feedback and those expectations and the practicing piece, but the teaching and the demonstration piece. And as I've gotten to spend more and more time in classrooms, I see that some of the better teachers or best teachers are coaches at heart, and seeing that. And the other part is that and this is true of music teachers too, is that they can, in real time as it's happening, they can see whether the kids get it or not. They can tell by, oh, that doesn't sound so good.
Yes.
Or, that's not how you catch a football, that's not how you throw a football, you have to step into it. And that gives them very timely feedback for kids.
Yeah,
And so that's something I would have enjoyed doing. And yeah.
So that is one way. What if you had never moved to the USA? Do you ever think about what your life, your family's life might have been had you stayed in Mexico?
I don't really think about it. I know, I think it's our family in Mexico, and they're happy. It's a different level of happiness. But no, I don't worry. It comes back to hard work, determination. Even in Mexico, we have very successful people.
Right.
It's more difficult, but hard work and persistence helps.
Well, do you think there'll be any opportunities in your future to be a coach, perhaps for your own child someday?
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe, that's certainly a possibility.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you think you want to add to these questions? We thank you so much for being part of this, and it'll help our students. But here's your chance to add anything more.
No, I think we're good. I think you did a good job interviewing me.
Thank you.
And helping me when I got stuck, saying, hey, let me phrase this question in a different way, which I think is a good skill to have.
Well, thank you. And you have given our children a good example, a good interview to start with, and you're welcome in the 6th grade classrooms anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a Rydell, Straily, and Jones production.